I had been waiting for this moment for years, working late nights, skipping weekends, and taking every extra project my boss threw at me. Finally, the promotion I had dreamed of was mine. My heart was pounding as I drove to my parents' house. I wanted them to see me, to feel proud, maybe even excited for once. I walked in with my head held high, holding the promotion letter like a trophy. My mom smiled politely, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then my dad looked up from his chair and everything changed. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't even ask how I felt. Instead, he leaned back and said something I wasn't expecting. From now on, there are new rules. You can't spend money without checking with us. No vacations, no big purchases, no decisions about your life without family approval. I froze. I stared at him, my hands gripping the letter so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had thought this day would feel like freedom, but it felt like chains. I had worked so hard, fought through every obstacle, and now they were trying to control me, to make me feel like a child again. My mom shifted uncomfortably, looking at me like she was caught in the middle, but my dad's words cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. Every achievement, every late night, every sacrifice, it didn't matter. In their eyes, my success was theirs to manage. For a moment, I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But deep down, something stirred inside me. A fire that refused to be put out. They thought they could control me, but I realized in that instant that I had a choice. I could obey, live under their rules and let them dictate my life. Or I could stand up and show them that this promotion didn't just change my job, it changed me. I had been waiting for this moment for years, working late nights, skipping weekends, and taking every extra project my boss threw at me. Finally, the promotion I had dreamed of was mine. My heart was pounding as I drove to my parents' house. I wanted them to see me, to feel proud, maybe even excited for once. I walked in with my head held high, holding the promotion letter like a trophy. My mom smiled politely, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then my dad looked up from his chair and everything changed. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't even ask how I felt. Instead, he leaned back and said something I wasn't expecting. From now on, there are new rules. You can't spend money without checking with us. No vacations, no big purchases, no decisions about your life without family approval. I froze. I stared at him, my hands gripping the letter so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had thought this day would feel like freedom, but it felt like chains. I had worked so hard, fought through every obstacle, and now they were trying to control me, to make me feel like a child again. My mom shifted uncomfortably, looking at me like she was caught in the middle, but my dad's words cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. Every achievement, every late night, every sacrifice, it didn't matter. In their eyes, my success was theirs to manage. For a moment, I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But deep down, something stirred inside me. A fire that refused to be put out. They thought they could control me, but I realized in that instant that I had a choice. I could obey, live under their rules and let them dictate my life. Or I could stand up and show them that this promotion didn't just change my job, it changed me. After that day, things at home started to feel different. Every time I tried to talk about work, my dad would make a quiet remark that stung more than he realized. Something like, "Don't let all that money make you forget where you came from." My mom would nod along, adding small comments about how life is about balance, not showing off. At first, I tried to brush it off, but the words kept hitting harder each time. Lila, my younger sister, was worse. She smiled at me in a way that didn't reach her eyes, always ready with a joke or a teasing comment that made me question myself. I started noticing little things she did behind the scenes, siding with my dad during arguments or subtly bringing up my failures from the past. It was like she enjoyed watching me struggle under their scrutiny. Even ordinary dinners became exhausting. Conversations turned into minefields. A simple question about my day would lead to passive-aggressive remarks about how success changes people, or how I was too focused on money now. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next jab would hit. The betrayal hurt more than anything else. These were the people who were supposed to support me, to celebrate me, to be proud. Instead, it felt like they were resentful of my hard work, of the life I was building for myself. Every accomplishment felt smaller in their eyes because they weren't happy for me. They were judging me, testing me, trying to pull me back. I began to realize that their love had strings attached, and my success had become a threat instead of a joy. The place that should have been safe felt like a battlefield, and I had to start figuring out how to survive without letting their words break me completely. A week after that tense dinner, my dad called me into the living room. He had that serious look on his face, the one that meant he wasn't open to discussion. "There's a new rule," he said, his voice calm but firm. "No vacaciones. No expensive purchases. And no friends outside the family circle without our approval." I sat there, stunned, unsure if I had heard him right. It wasn't just controlling anymore. It was suffocating. Every plan I had, every little thing I wanted to enjoy, suddenly needed their permission. The more I listened, the clearer it became. This wasn't about concern. This was about jealousy. My success had made them uncomfortable, and they were trying to keep me small. I thought back to all the late nights, the weekends I had sacrificed, the stress I had endured to get here. Every moment I had worked, every opportunity one had chased, and now it felt like none of it mattered. Their rule wasn't protection. It was a chain, meant to keep me under their watch. The betrayal sank in slowly, like a heavy stone in my chest. I realized that the people who had promised to support me were now trying to control my every move. It wasn't just about money. It was about my independence, my freedom, the life I had built with my own hands. For the first time, I felt the weight of their resentment clearly. They weren't proud. They weren't happy. And that realization hit harder than anything else. I had given them my loyalty, my time, my energy. And now they wanted to take my happiness too. The fire inside me started to burn brighter. I knew then that I couldn't just accept this. Something had to change, or I would lose myself completely. I couldn't keep it all inside anymore. That night, I called Carter, my oldest friend, someone who had always been honest with me. I told him everything. About the new rules, the digs, the way my family seemed to resent my success. He listened quietly, then said something that hit me harder than I expected. "This isn't normal. They're being toxic, not protective. You deserve to celebrate your achievements, not live under their rules." His words stayed with me long after the call ended. I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, holding my promotion letter in my hands. The paper felt heavier than it should. I stared at it, thinking about all the late nights, the stress, the sacrifices I had made to reach this point. And then the anger came. Hot and sharp. I was angry at them for trying to control me, at Lila for undermining me, and at myself for letting their opinions hurt me so deeply. But mixed with the anger was sadness. A deep ache that the people who were supposed to be proud of me were instead trying to stifle my happiness. Confusion followed, swirling in my mind. How could the people I loved most turn against me like this? How could something that should have been a celebration feel like a trap? I pressed the letter to my chest and realized something important. My happiness was being hijacked by the very people who should have been my biggest supporters. That night, I felt broken, but also a small spark of resolve. I couldn't let them control me anymore. I had to figure out a way to protect myself, to take back the joy that was rightfully mine. For the first time, I understood that standing up for myself wasn't just an option, it was a necessity. The next morning, I woke up with a quiet decision already made in my mind. I couldn't live like this anymore. I wasn't a child, and I wasn't anyone's puppet. If I kept obeying, they would keep tightening their grip until there was nothing left of me. I didn't plan anything loud or dramatic. I knew that would only give them more power. Instead, I started small. I opened a separate savings account and quietly moved part of my paycheck into it. No announcements. No permission asked. Just a simple step that felt bigger than it should have. I began paying for things on my own without explaining myself. Groceries, work clothes, small upgrades that made my daily life easier. Every decision felt risky, but also freeing. In my head, I kept reminding myself that I had earned this. No one had handed it to me. The pain was still there. It hurt knowing I had to move like this in my own family's house. Sometimes guilt crept in, whispering that I was being selfish. But then I remembered the looks, the rules, the way my success had been turned into something ugly. That guilt slowly turned into determination. I also started paying closer attention to how they spoke to me. The patterns became clear. Concern was always followed by control. Advice always came with limits. Seeing it clearly made it easier not to fall for it. Late at night, I would sit quietly and think, telling myself this wasn't about revenge fueled by anger. It was about taking my life back, step by step. If they wanted control, I would show them they no longer had it. Without shouting, without fighting, just by choosing myself. Each small decision strengthened me. I was still hurting, but now that pain had direction. I wasn't running anymore. I was preparing, patiently and carefully, for the moment when they would realize I was no longer under their control. A few weeks later, the first real clash happened. My dad stormed into my room, face red, eyes sharp. "I heard you rented an apartment," he demanded, like I had committed a crime. "How dare you make decisions without consulting us?" I stayed calm, holding my ground. "I earned this," I said, my voice steady. "It's my life, my choice. I'm not asking for permission anymore." His face twisted with anger. He shouted, pacing the room, listing everything he thought I was doing wrong. Every word was meant to intimidate, to make me back down. But this time, something was different. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I let him vent, letting the tension fill the room. And I stayed silent when he expected fear or tears. My mom hovered nearby, wringing her hands, caught between them. I noticed her eyes, the way they softened when she looked at me. There was a quiet pride there, hidden behind worry and habit. It gave me a little strength, a reminder that not everyone in the house was against me. The argument ended without resolution, but I felt a shift inside me. For the first time, I had defended my independence and refused to bow to their control. I felt a strange mix of relief and power. It wasn't about winning against them. It was about winning myself back. That night, I walked through the empty rooms of my new apartment, imagining my life unfolding on my terms. The tension at home hadn't disappeared, but the fear had. I realized that standing up, even calmly, could feel like a victory. And for the first time, I felt the sweet taste of freedom creeping back into my life, one choice at a time. Slowly, I began to build my life on my own terms. I decorated my new apartment the way I liked, small touches that made it feel like mine. I met new people through work and community events, people who respected me for who I was, not for what my family thought I should be. Opportunities started coming my way, projects, invitations, chances to grow. And I took them without asking for approval. Of course, my dad and Lila noticed. They tried their usual tactics. Veiled threats, comments meant to make me feel guilty, even emotional blackmail. "If you keep pushing, don't expect us to be there for you," my dad said one evening. Lila added, "You're acting like money and independence mean everything." But this time I didn't bend. I listened, I acknowledged their words, but I didn't let them change my mind or control my actions. Every time I made a decision without them, every time I said yes to myself instead of obeying their rules, I felt a quiet thrill. These were small victories, almost invisible to anyone else, but to me, they mattered more than anything. I was learning that independence wasn't just about money or apartments. It was about feeling confident in my choices, trusting my instincts, and valuing myself. I started noticing a change in how I carried myself. I walked taller, spoke clearer, and smiled more often. Even when they tried to pull me back with words or guilt, it didn't stick. Each step I took on my own was proof that I didn't need their approval to succeed or be happy. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of power that wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about reclaiming my life and discovering my own worth. One evening, I decided it was time to stop letting things simmer in silence. At dinner, I looked at my dad and Lila across the table and spoke calmly but firmly. "I need to say something," I began. "I've been patient, but I can't ignore how things have been happening in this family." I told them how their rules weren't about care or guidance. They were about control. I explained how I noticed Lila constantly trying to undermine me, feeding my dad details to make me look guilty or reckless. I described the guilt trips, the threats, the constant attempts to manipulate my choices. I kept my voice steady, not angry, just honest. At first, there was a flicker of disbelief on their faces. My dad opened his mouth to interrupt, but I didn't let him. I continued, pointing out how their words and actions had made me feel small, trapped, and constantly questioned. I told them that while I had tried to respect their advice, I wasn't going to live under fear or control anymore. The room went silent. Lila shifted uncomfortably, and even my dad looked as if he hadn't expected me to speak like this. The calmness in my tone seemed to hit harder than any shouting or argument ever could. My words laid everything out clearly, showing the patterns they had probably hoped I wouldn't notice. For the first time, the power in the room felt balanced. I wasn't pleading or begging. I was stating the truth, showing them that I saw their intentions and that I wouldn't be manipulated anymore. That quiet moment, the shocked silence, felt like a turning point. I realized that standing firm, speaking honestly, and not letting emotion take over could be more powerful than any fight or argument I had ever imagined. A few nights later, I decided to take control in a different way. At dinner, I calmly shared some news with the family. "I just received a big bonus at work," I said, smiling lightly. "And I've been offered a leadership position I've been aiming for years." I watched their reactions carefully. My dad's jaw tightened, and Lila's eyes widened. Neither of them could interrupt or twist the story this time. The news was mine to share, and they had no control over how it was received. I continued, explaining what the opportunity meant for me. More responsibility, more independence, and a life built on my own choices. I didn't shout. I didn't brag. I just stated it clearly, letting the facts speak for themselves. The room grew quiet. My calm delivery contrasted sharply with their usual attempts at intimidation. I could see my dad processing that his rules, his manipulations, had failed. Lila's usual smirk was gone, replaced by a tense unease. For once, they weren't in charge. I felt a deep satisfaction settle over me. This wasn't revenge through anger or shouting. It was the quiet, deliberate kind. By taking control of my life and asserting my achievements without apology, I had shown them that their attempts to dictate my path had backfired completely. That night, I realized that true victory didn't come from fighting or retaliating. It came from standing firm, making decisions for myself, and letting my success speak louder than any argument. They had tried to keep me small, but now they had no choice but to see me as I really was. Independent, capable, and unshakable. For the first time, I felt fully in control of my life, and that feeling was more powerful than anything they could ever say or do. After the dinner revelation, I knew things couldn't go back to the way they were. I decided to set clear boundaries. I would still show love to my family, but I wouldn't allow manipulation or guilt to control me anymore. Every decision I made, every step I took, was mine, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. Over time, my mom began to reconnect with me. Without my dad and Lila constantly interfering, our conversations became real again. She shared small moments of support, asking about my work, my apartment, even my new friends. It was different from before, calm, honest, and without judgment. I could feel her pride in me, and it made the distance between us feel smaller. I noticed how much stronger I felt. I wasn't just surviving under their rules anymore. I was thriving on my own terms. Respect wasn't demanded. It came naturally when I stood firm and lived my life authentically. The fear and frustration that had followed me for years were finally replaced with confidence and a sense of freedom I hadn't felt before. For the first time, I understood what revenge really meant. It wasn't about hurting them or proving them wrong. It was about reclaiming my life, protecting my happiness, and refusing to let anyone dictate who I could become. Every boundary I set, every choice I made independently, was a quiet victory, proof that I was in control. Sitting in my apartment one evening, I reflected on how far I had come. I had faced betrayal, manipulation, and emotional pressure, but I had emerged stronger. I felt respected, free, and at peace with my decisions. The family dynamic had shifted, and while not everything was perfect, I had taken back what mattered most: my life, my choices, and my dignity. Months later, I found myself looking back at everything that had happened. What had started as a simple promotion, something I had worked so hard for, had turned into a storm I never expected. It had tested my patience, my strength, and even my sense of who I was. But in the end, it became the catalyst for my independence. I realized that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It can hurt deeply, yes, but it can also teach you lessons you can't learn any other way. I had learned patience, the kind that comes from knowing when to act and when to wait. I had learned strength, not the loud kind, but the quiet, steady kind that grows from standing firm. Most importantly, I had learned self-respect, how to protect my life, my happiness, and my choices without feeling guilty. Looking at my promotion letter on my desk, I felt a mix of pride and relief. The people who had tried to control me, to make me doubt myself, could no longer touch the life I had built. Every step I had taken, every boundary I had set, every decision I had made independently had brought me here. I wasn't just successful at work anymore. I was successful in reclaiming my life. Sometimes I think about how they expected me to bend, to obey, to let their rules define me. But they underestimated me. They thought my success would make me their puppet, that I would let their jealousy and control dictate my happiness. They didn't expect my response, and that's what made all the difference. Now, whenever I face challenges, I remember that moment. Betrayal doesn't have to break you. It can make you unstoppable if you learn to stand firm, trust yourself, and take control of your own life.
Some stories don't end, they follow you. If this one stayed in your mind, you know what to do.